Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rhino Recovery Fund presentation, and I'm very privileged to be able to do this talk together with Markus Ngwenyama and Petronel Nieuwoudt from Care for Wild. So this is me with a rhino called Shungu. He is a rhino that I really enjoy talking about because he is a symbol of hope. He was orphaned in Zimbabwe and traveled around the country to a number of places, managed to evade the poachers. Eventually, we managed to bring him to North Luangwa National Park from Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. So it was an international translocation and a range expansion project. We didn't know at the time that he was actually orphaned when we received him, because the information we got from him, from the people we brought him from, weren't that clear about it. He ended up living on the airstrip before we released him back into the wild. But his translocation was very, very tough because they're not easy animals to translocate. But because he wanted to live and he wanted to be wild and he connected with everybody there, he's just such a symbol of hope. So you can all remember the name Shungu from North Luangwa. And just on that point, my background has been very much invested in rhino translocations, rhino rewilding, monitoring of rhinos. We developed many, many techniques of improving rhino translocations. And I thought this was an apt physical representation of the Rhino Recovery Fund. So what are the issues facing rhinos today? So this is a photo of a little rhino that I took in Indonesia, the Sumatran rhino, of which there are not many left. And the tragedy about this particular group of species is that they've evolved to be so successful that they don't actually have natural predators. As adults, there are very few things that can kill a rhino. And in the wild and in safe places, it's usually another rhino that kills an adult rhino, or a stochastic event like a drought or floods or fire, old age, disease maybe. And then if they're young calves, occasionally they get killed by predators. But as adults, they're one of the most successful species on Earth. And for the last 200 years, our species has just exploded over the planet. We've taken over most of the wild landscapes of the land masses, and therefore rhinos, just like lions and other big mammal species, are struggling to compete with all the humans and all the livestock that are coming with them. And we need to try and protect the species and make space for them and make them survive into the future. As I said before, they are very successful species, but they're not very adaptive because they haven't been able to cope, or the time span in which we really got to hunt these rhinos was so short that they haven't been able to adapt. So there are not many wild animals that can be shot on one spot like this without them running away. So this just highlights how important it is for us to save the species, because you've made that conscious choice to do so. And this is what it's all about, the horn. It is one of the most valuable natural commodities you can find. A kilogram of horn is worth more than a kilogram of gold, yet it's just the same material as our fingernail, keratin, but there are all sorts of cultural stigmas associated with this, and more it's now a symbol of wealth. So we need to change that picture. So the Rhino Recovery Fund is something that we would like to play a big role in to promote the recovery of rhinos by restoring their landscapes, arresting wildlife crime, and putting rhinos into the hearts of their guardians, because we have to be their guardians as people. So these are the two big categories of the projects that we would like to invest into: rhino guardians and rhino landscapes. So unfortunately, due to the very high commodity price of the horn, rhinos have to be protected in a very, very deliberate fashion. So we'd like to invest in anti-poaching projects, disrupt wildlife criminals, which is very important and the long-term solution here, and work on solutions to end the demand for horn in countries where they're still being used. And the bigger picture and long-term vision that we have is really to restore habitat, safe habitat, where rhinos can breed naturally, which they're very good at. We would like to support protected area management, and then more and more we would like to make sure that communities become co-owners of rhinos throughout their ranges and wherever they're going to be reintroduced, because that is the best way to protect this very important species. Here are the areas where rhinos still exist. It's a country-specific map, not a site-specific area. So if you take them just to the sites, it's a much smaller distribution. They've disappeared from most of their rangelands. And 3 species, the Javan, Sumatran, African black rhino, are critically endangered. the Indian greater or the greater one-horned rhino is vulnerable, and then the white rhino is near threatened, who is actually the real story of success, because they went down to less than 20, the southern white rhino, less than 20 animals at the turn of the last century. So this is the picture of a white rhino. There are roughly 13 to 15,000 of them left in the world. We would like to see the decline stop with this rhino. And this is one species we can hopefully invest into heavily to become community owned, live with livestock, be an example of a species that can easily coexist with people and their livestock. Black rhino, a critically endangered species in Africa, down to less than 5,000 or just over 5,000 animals. They are very difficult to reintroduce because of the complex social nature. So we would like to expand the numbers or increase the numbers in areas where they occur, and in the very near future try and introduce new populations into previous range states, because the security and the protection is adequate now to save them there. The same for the greater one-horned rhinos. Another success story actually. They went down to less than 200 at the beginning of the last century, now up to 3,500 in India and Nepal. But we do need to put them into more areas where they historically occurred, because some of the areas where large populations occur, like Kaziranga, very flood prone, and you could have a major disaster if you had a stochastic flood going through that park. Second last, the Javan rhino occurs only in one national park in the whole world, and that is in Indonesia. So the priority here is to protect those rhinos that are there, and then create a second park where they can be established and grow into a new population. Last but not least, the oldest of the 5 rhino species and the only 2-horned rhino in Asia, the Sumatran rhino. It's a little rhino with hair, living in the deepest jungle of Indonesia on the islands of Sumatra and Borneo. Probably less than 50 wild rhinos left, and unfortunately not in one area. They spread all over the place, and therefore very difficult to recover, but we will try and invest in landscapes where there's still remnants of successful populations or possible successful populations, and hopefully this species will still be around for another couple of 100 years for us to see. So despite the very bleak picture that has occurred in the recent decades, it is possible to recover rhinos. They're very successful species. If we give them safe and good habitat, they breed well, and they have recovered, as we've shown with some of the species in the past. And to sort of embrace this story, I'm very grateful for the time and effort that my colleagues who are on the call, Mark and Petronel, and they will be talking about their projects in the Barberton area of South Africa. It's a beautiful area of rich biodiversity and endemism. It has been recently declared a World Heritage Site because it encompasses some of the oldest exposed rocks in the world. And part of that area will be safely fenced and incorporated so that this prehistoric and very old mammal can be reintroduced into safe habitat. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to Petronel to talk about one aspect of the Care for Wild project. Thanks, Petronel.
I am Petronel Nieuwoudt, and I'm from the Care for Wild Rhino Sanctuary here in South Africa. And a little bit on my background, grew up in Limpopo in South Africa, and then mom a teacher and my dad a farmer, crops, domestic animals, and some free-roaming wildlife. And then studied in Johannesburg, and then joined the Endangered Species Protection Unit of the police in South Africa. So I've seen enough of the criminal activities and decided, wait, my heart is definitely with saving species and working with people that's like-minded of just get animals back from extinction. So I moved to Mpumalanga, and there start Care for Wild Rhino Sanctuary. So I'm going to discuss a little bit of the following points: the rapid rescue of a rhino, the thorough rehabilitation, successful rewilding or release, proper protection, and then the sustainability and community-based projects I will leave to Mark and Ngwenyama. So when Kruger asked me to help them and take these rhino orphans in, you know, you must be careful what you wish for, because it was just raining rhinos, and I never knew it will be so many. And I realized this dream of mine of helping Kruger, saving rhinos, of saving baby rhinos, you know, comes with such a responsibility. So thinking about my life and how it changed, you know, I realized rhino matters, not the horns. Every single rhino matters. So for me, it was such a privilege, and I realized very quickly it is not our rights, but a complete privilege to work with these iconic species. And there you see the heartbreaking devastation of these animals. So once a poaching takes place, there's a baby to be rescued. There's a baby to be taken to a sanctuary with the correct facilities, with the correct staff, with rhino keepers, as I call them, but they're actually all angels. So time is of the essence. You do not want the orphan calf to suffer more. And in this situation, it was little Arthur that was lying next to his mom dead, and it was a Sunday afternoon and a beautiful day in August, and we were walking in the mountain, and the next moment, you know, I hear a chopper coming overhead, and I thought, but this is the Kruger helicopter, you know, that special green and yellow chopper, and it's always a feeling of what's happening, you know, what's going on. And it was, I watched my phone, it was ETA 15 minutes. And I know, well, if they're already here, we need to get there. But I have a magnificent team of people, young people, very passionate people. And, you know, I've learned so much from them. I've learned so much from these resilience of these animals. And this gives us all so much hope. And Africa keeps us humble. And in this case, there was little Arthur ready to be rescued. And remember, the chopper leave, and then it's us there. And look at this horrific wounds. You know, he was fighting for his mom's life. That's why it's Arthur the Brave. And you can see the machete wounds on him. So immediately think about wound care. Think about the pain and the stress and the trauma. And if they're this small, there's no harness yet. And you can see this in Arthur. He was ready to live. He was ready to run and play. And here you can see where we work a little bit on his toe and put stitches in there and put stitches on his back. And after that, he was playing with the tire. And I remember weighing him, and he was weighing only 60 kilograms. So he was a newborn and soft. His ears were so pink, and it is so special. So if I think about going from there, you know, the good management must be in place. Good staff, trained staff, responsible staff, commitment, 24 hours, you know, good routine. And then they don't even know how to drink from a river. They don't know what to do. So if we think about every day we see these different miracles happen. And especially with Arthur, when we moved him down to the bigger bomas, we have ICU, then we have other bomas, bigger bomas, where there's other orphans already. And here's Arthur with Summer. You know that song, Summertime and the Living is Easy? There's the two of them there, you know. So if you look at Arthur here, become a strong bull. And he's such a cheeky one, you know, and he's ready for the new steps in rehabilitation. So in your rehabilitation processes, it's time to step back and see how they're doing. And Arthur was doing so well. And before we know it, you know, he was ready for a new step in his life. And this is where you have range expansion. This is where you need to do the rewilding. But it's definitely more than rewilding and open the cage and the bird will fly. It's more reintroduction of this iconic species into a healthy ecosystem. And how beautiful is that? How you know, how much hope do you see in that walk of a rhino bull, and they're out there and it's territorial and they're with their crushes. And this is our hope for each and every rhino that we take in, that in a range expansion, there must be good water, there must be good grazing, there must be good browsing. So thinking about the steps and never miss a step, this is what I feel. We must see this as a complete right and as a privilege and not a right at all. So just something quickly on the statistics. If we look at a rhino orphan that's been rescued, we must know there's only 50% detected. Of that 50%, 20% is euthanized, will be euthanized. And of those other 30% that's come to sanctuaries, there's a recovering rate of 85 to 90%. It's up to us to save them. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce my colleague and good friend, Markus Ngwenyama, an incredible leader, an irrefutable champion for Care for Wild within the South African context. He's leading the way, and this is where Rhino meets rocks. Thank you for your leadership and your wisdom and guidance. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Petronel, and thank you, Markus, and thank you everyone for the time that you've made to avail yourself to listen to us and the stories of what we are doing. My name is Markus Ngwenyama. I was born in Soweto in Johannesburg, grew up in the old Eastern Transvaal, called Mpumalanga today. I'm a resident of Barberton today. In my younger age, we at school, conditions then were conducive to be young activists, hoping to have a better South Africa, which we today enjoying, myself, Petronel, and Markus and the rest of our population. And the world is also coming here, seeing how good and hospitable our country is and ourselves. I'm a program manager at Barberton, which is Barberton Tourism and Biodiversity Corridor. We are doing tourism infrastructural development and tourism based on nature and responsible tourism. We are at Care for Wild people who have looked quite closely on the challenges of conservation in general, and being faced with the siege of the rhinos that they are finding themselves under. We've realized certain aspects that have been missed out when you speak conservation in general. That was the exclusion of the general communities or the public. And that has created the us and them scenario, and therefore creating a gap which criminality has taken advantage of. However, added to that is the fact that we've got palpable poverty in our continent, in our country. We are not different from other developing countries. And looking at that at Care for Wild, we've realized that if you empower the communities, assisting them to be able to fend for themselves, to put food on their table every day, you are doing justice, because they are able to enjoy the fruits of true freedom. Because true freedom, in my books, will be when somebody can be able to use their natural resources for their benefit in a responsible way, and also be able to realize that they need to protect the environment itself. And here at Care for Wild, with the contributions towards the Rhino Sanctuary, which is Care for Wild, where I'm a board member, we've got resources now that have been invested in the community project. And this community, interestingly, is a community that is led by Chief Kondele Dlamini in the picture here, who has now contributed with this community their portions of land specifically for conservation. And the 2,800 hectares that they've contributed is specifically for conservation, and it's an area, if you've noticed on Markus' last slide, is the land in which the rhinos will be reintroduced to the wild. As Petronel was talking about the importance of rewilding of these animals, and so that they can grow in their natural habitat and do their things naturally under protection. And this is being done in a way of empowering the communities As you see here, they've worked the lands. We are selling the produce from the land, and what is sold and the resources accrued out of that is reinvested back to the preservation and protection of the rhinos. And therefore, this collective approach, it gives you the strongest foundation and guarantee that the rhinos themselves are protected, because not only by people who will be carrying guns and mounted on horses and with dogs, but the communities becomes your added layer of security and protection for the rhinos. And these also get cascaded down to the children who are beneficiaries, of what we see happening in the farm. And therefore, we view that as a hope for the future that gave us some kind of hope, if I will, that what we have started, it's something that will grow in perpetuity, because the children that will have seen what is happening in their environment, in their areas, by their parents, they will definitely, some of them will take over the baton and run with this in protection of the environment in general, and conservation in particular. And we work with multiple stakeholders, as I've seen on the previous slide, where we work with the traditional authority, we're working with government, both national, provincial, and local in South African government as tiers of governance. This shows the buy-in of the broader spectrum of willing parties or willing partners that shares common goal towards the security and protection of these creatures. And this has now given us, I'll say, reason to be able to push much more stronger towards what we have started. And if one could also just add in my closing remarks, is that in the traditional authority spheres, we've got Imimemo. It's a national, it's an annual event where the chief and the communities discuss challenges of their communities. And this in particular, the projects now has found themselves in the agenda of those events, which is good, because when you speak to the broader community, we're spreading the word and the message. And interestingly, in our case, they see the results basically because their lands are being worked and they see the benefits out of it. And therefore you are cementing, I would say, the foundation of what we are starting, which is the protection of environment in general and conservation. And this for us is giving us hope that in Africa, we still have the chance of saving what we have. And what we have is our world's inheritance. And people like yourselves are basically saying we are family members joining in protection of our inheritance as a humanity. And this therefore gives us hope. And in Africa, we've got to say that the strongest wind, the strongest tree is mostly blown by the strongest wind, but those winds cannot shake a man's head. And what I'm saying about this is that we know what we've started. It has its own challenges, but we are not shaken. We are steadfast. We know that we'll succeed, and we're moving forward with this. And with your contributions, you are merely helping us being able to do this thing. And with that in hand, we definitely are grateful for your availability and the contributions, and those that will be coming on board in the future with innovative ideas to help us improve in the way that we're doing things. And I'd like to thank everybody, my colleagues and every other people that have made this possible. And thank you everyone.